Okay, I'm live now. I put on some more lipstick, lip gloss, whatever it is. And I'm live to finally finish up the Wuthering Heights chapter that I did not finish because I got a phone call. Yay! Hello! Makes me feel like it's doing something. Okay, I'm very sorry. I have a cold. It's going to sound weird. I'm alive! I'm alive. Nick, how about you? We're all making it through. What's up? Hi, John. Hi, Danny. We're just going to recap what happened in the last half chapter. Okay. So, a while back, Heathcliff, Isabella Linton fancied Heathcliff. Oh. And Kathy was like, no, he's gross. He does not have a heart of gold. And he was like, yeah, I'm gross. I'm a real son of a bitch. I have no heart of gold. Isabella Linton was like, oh, because she's 18. So Heathcliff has been banned from Thrushcross Grange because there was a fight and some things were said that maybe shouldn't have been said. Like Kathy told Edgar that he was weak and she didn't really love him or respect him. And then he punched Heathcliff in the neck, which was pretty funny. So Heathcliff's been banned. Kathy is angry at Edgar. Isabella just walks around in the garden crying. So Nellie comes up to see Kathy, who has been starving herself for about 3 days, and she brings her some tea and toast, and Kathy eats it. But then it turns out she actually is mental now. And she goes around talking about how she would kill herself if she knew that it would hurt Edgar, if she knew it would kill Edgar. She's such a bitch. She's pulling all the feathers out of the duvet, naming which birds they are. All right, she thinks she's at Wuthering Heights in her bedroom there. Yeah, she's been having a recurring dream about being at Wuthering Heights and being separated from Heathcliff, because at the moment she's at Thrushcross Grange and being separated from Heathcliff. Right. And she's an angel. Yes. Why is everyone mad at me? At me? All I did was what any reality TV star would do if the ratings were dropping. So, yeah, half a chapter deserves a 5-minute recap, not a 10-minute. Right. So at the moment, Kathy's leaning out the window. It's winter. It's horrible. There was no moon. Everything beneath lay in misty darkness. Not a light gleamed from any house, far or near. All had been extinguished long ago, and those at Wuthering Heights were never visible. Still, she asserted she caught their shining. That's what we got up to. Look, she cried eagerly. That's my room with the candle in it, and the trees swaying before it. And the other candle is in Joseph's garret. Joseph sits up late, doesn't he? He's waiting till I come home, that he may lock the gate. Well, he'll wait a while yet. It's a rough journey, and a sad heart to travel it, and we must pass by Gimmerton Kirk to go that journey. We've braved its ghosts often together, and dared each other to stand among the graves and ask them to come. But Heathcliff, if I dare you now, will you venture? If you do, I'll keep you. I'll deep and throw rest till you are with me, and I never will. She paused and resumed with a strange smile. He's considering. He'd rather I'd come to him. Find a way then, not through that churchyard. You are slow. Be content. You always followed me. A kirkyard is a churchyard or graveyard. I mean, it's a beautiful love story about two completely mental people who hate everyone except each other and are also really self-destructive of each other. It's kind of wonderful. Can see why this is an enduring romance. I will not lie there by myself. Perceiving it was vain to argue against her insanity, I was planning how I could reach something to wrap about her without quitting my hold of herself, for I could not trust her alone by the gaping lattice. When, to my consternation, I heard the rattle of the door handle, and Mr. Linton entered. He had only then come from the library, and in passing through the lobby had noticed our talking, and been attracted by curiosity or fear to examine what it signified at that late hour. "Oh, sir," I cried, checking the exclamation risen to my lips at the sight which met him in the bleak atmosphere of the chamber. "My poor mistress is ill, and she quite masters me. I cannot manage her at all. Pray come and persuade her to go to bed. Forget your anger, for she's hard to guide any way but her own." "Catherine ill," he said, hastening to us. "Shut the window, Ellen. Catherine! Why?" He was silent. The haggardness of Mrs. Linton's appearance smote him speechless, and he could only glance from her to me in horrified astonishment. "She's been fretting here," I continued, "and eating scarcely anything, and never complaining. She would admit none of us till this evening, and so we couldn't inform you of her state, as we were not aware of it ourselves. But it is nothing." I felt I uttered my explanations awkwardly. The master frowned. "It is nothing, is it, Ellen Dean?" he said sternly. "You shall account more dearly for keeping me ignorant of this." And he took his wife in his arms and looked at her with anguish. At first she gave him no glance of recognition. He was invisible to her abstracted gaze. The delirium was not fixed, however. Having weaned her eyes from contemplating the outer darkness, by degrees she centered her attention on him, and discovered who it was that held her. "Ah, you are come, are you, Edgar Linton?" she said with angry animation. "You are one of those things that are ever found when least wanted, and when you are wanted, never. I suppose we shall have plenty of lamentations now. I see we shall, but they can't keep me from my narrow home out yonder, my resting place, where I'm bound before spring is over. There it is. Not among the Lintons, mind, under the chapel roof, but in the open air with a headstone, and you may please yourself whether you go to them or come to me." Wow, she doesn't even want to be buried with him. She's mad. "Catherine, what have you done?" commenced the master. "Am I nothing to you any more? Do you love that wretch, Heath—" "Hush," said Mrs. Linton. "Hush this moment. You mention that name, and I end the matter instantly by a spring from the window. What you touch at present you may have, but my soul will be on that hilltop before you lay hands on me again. I don't want you, Edgar. I'm past wanting you. Return to your books. I'm glad you possess a consolation, for all that you had in me is gone." God, she's being unkind. "Her mind wanders, sir," I interposed. "She has been talking nonsense the whole evening. but let her have quiet and proper attendance and she'll rally. Hereafter we must be cautious how we vex her. I just want to take a moment to say that why don't I have a doctor who says that medically I mustn't ever be denied anything I want or argued with? Where's that doctor, right? I desire no further advice from you, answered Mr. Linton. You knew your mistress's nature, and you encouraged me to harass her, and not to give me one hint of how she has been these 3 days. It was heartless. Months of sickness could not have caused such a change. I began to defend myself, thinking it too bad to be blamed for another's wicked waywardness. I knew Mrs. Linton's nature to be headstrong and domineering, cried I, but I didn't know that you wished to foster her fierce temper. I didn't know that to humour her I should wink at Mr. Heathcliff. I perform the duty of a faithful servant in telling you, and I have got a faithful servant's wages. Well, it will teach me to be careful next time. Next time you may gather intelligence for yourself. I mustn't be vexed. I shall pull all the feathers out of the duvet if I'm vexed. It's a good illustration of it, but I think it's somewhere later in the book. The next time you bring a tale to me, you shall quit my service, Ellen Dean, he replied. You'd rather hear nothing about it, I suppose, then, Mr. Linton, said I. Heathcliff has your permission to come a-courting to Miss, and to drop in at every opportunity your absence offers on purpose to poison the mistress against you. Oh, yes, hello, darling. No one else? Just you. Okay. It was Flora. She's come home. She's so cold. Confused as Catherine was, her wits were alert at applying our conversation. Ah, Nellie has played traitor, she exclaimed passionately. Nellie is my hidden enemy. You witch. So you do seek elf bolts to hurt us. Let me go, and I'll make her rue. I'll make her howl a recantation. A maniac's fury kindled under her brows. She struggled desperately to disengage herself from Linton's arms. I felt no inclination to tarry the event, and resolving to seek medical aid on my own responsibility, I quitted the chamber. In passing the garden to reach the road, actually, I've got a really interesting, I think it's really interesting, little side notation. When Kathy's talking about Nellie looking for elf bolts to hurt them, medieval people would often dig up, in the process of digging shit, which was all they did, they would dig up arrowheads and, things like that from the Stone Age, from the Romans or whatever, and they would recognize them as arrowheads or knives and things, but they thought that they belonged to elves. So they thought elves came out in the night and struck you, which is still where we get the word stroke. That's what a stroke is. It is an elf firing arrow at you invisibly, because they had no way of explaining these events. So, there you are. That's what elf bolts are. Well, I thought it was interesting. In passing the garden to reach the road, at a place where a bridle hook is driven into the wall, I saw something white moved irregularly, evidently by another agent than the wind. Notwithstanding my hurry, I stayed to examine it, lest ever after I should have the conviction impressed on my imagination that it was a creature of the other world. It was a fun fact. Elves did it. That was medical science back then. Usually, probably an elf did it. My surprise and perplexity were great on discovering, by touch more than vision, Miss Isabella's Springer, Fanny, suspended by a handkerchief, and nearly at its last gasp. I quickly released the animal and lifted it into the garden. I had seen it follow its mistress upstairs when she went to bed, and wondered much how it could have got out there and what mischievous person had treated it so. While untying the knot round the hook, it seemed to me that I repeatedly caught the beat of horses' feet galloping at some distance, but there were such a number of things to occupy my reflections that I hardly gave the circumstance a thought, though it was a strange sound in that place at 2 o'clock in the morning. Sounded a bit like someone was outside. Yeah, exactly. Why would you use a stone arrowhead? Only elves. Mr. Kenneth was fortunately just issuing from his house to see a patient in the village as I came up the street, Mr. Kenneth being the local doctor, and my account of Catherine Linton's malady induced him to accompany me back immediately. He was a plain, rough man, and he made no scruple to speak his doubts of her surviving the second attack, unless she were more submissive to his directions than she had shown herself before. If the cure requires you to do as you're told, Kathy's gonna up and die. She's a horrible character, but I have this grudging respect for her, which I would not have in real life. Nellie Dean, said he, I can't help fancying there's an extra cause for this. What has there been to do at the Grange? We've odd reports up here. A stout, hearty lass like Catherine does not fall ill for a trifle, and that sort of people should not either. It's hard work bringing them through fevers and such things. How did it begin? The master will inform you, I answered, but you are acquainted with the Earnshaw's violent dispositions, and Mrs. Linton caps them all. I may say this, it commenced in a quarrel. She was struck during a tempest of passion with a kind of fit. That's her account, at least, for she flew off in the height of it and locked herself up. Afterwards she refused to eat, and now she alternately raves and remains in a half-dream, knowing those about her, but having her mind filled with all sorts of strange ideas and illusions. Yeah. She absolutely has to stop drawing caricatures of me, giving them to children to copy and give to their friends. It's a modern medical method. She just stops it. Mr. Linton will be sorry, observed Kenneth interrogatively. Sorry, he'll break his heart should anything happen, I replied. Don't alarm him more than necessary. Back in those days, if your wife was dying, the doctor would be like, you gonna be bummed, bro? You gonna be bummed out? Yeah, I got you, bro. It was a routine question. I know, it's so gothic. Emily Bronte, man. Well, I told him to beware, said my companion, and he must bide the consequences of neglecting my warning. Hasn't he been intimate with Mr. Heathcliff lately? It didn't mean that at the time. Edgar and Heathcliff are not having sex, although they might be happier if they did. Heathcliff frequently visits at the Grange, answered I, though more on the strength of the mistress having known him when a boy than because the master likes his company. At present he's discharged from the trouble of calling, owing to some presumptuous aspirations after Miss Linton which he manifested. I hardly think he'll be taken in again. And does Miss Linton turn a cold shoulder on him? Was the doctor's next question. Gossipy Gladys. I'm not in her confidence, returned I, reluctant to continue the subject. No, she's a sly one, he remarked, shaking his head. She keeps her own counsel. But she's a real little fool. I have it from good authority that last night, and a pretty night it was, She and Heathcliff were walking in the plantation at the back of your house above 2 hours, and he pressed her not to go in again, but just mount his horse and away with him. My informant said she could only put him off by pledging her word of honour to be prepared on their first meeting after that. When it was to be, he didn't hear. But you urged Mr. Linton to look sharp. Did it not occur to you to tell Edgar? No. As a doctor, the only thing he really has to do is be like, if your sister ran off, would you be bummed? Would you be bummed out, bro? Oh, that sucks, man. This news filled me with fresh fears. I outstripped Kenneth and ran most of the way back. The little dog was yelping in the garden yet. I spared a minute to open the gate for it, but instead of going to the house door, it coursed up and down, snuffling the grass, and would have escaped the road had I not seized it and conveyed it in with me. On ascending to Isabella's room, my suspicions were confirmed. It was empty. Had I been a few hours sooner, Mrs. Linton's illness might have arrested her rash step. But what could be done now? There was a bare possibility of overtaking them if pursued instantly. I could not pursue them, however, and I dared not rouse the family and fill the place with confusion, still less unfold the business to my master, absorbed as he was in his present calamity, and having no heart to spare for a second grief. I saw nothing for it but to hold my tongue, and suffer matters to take their course. And Kenneth being arrived, I went with a badly composed countenance to announce him. Catherine lay in a troubled sleep. Her husband had succeeded in soothing the excess of frenzy. He now hung over her pillow, watching every shade and every change of her painfully expressive features. The doctor, on examining the case for himself, spoke hopefully to him of its having a favourable termination, if we could only preserve around her perfect and constant tranquillity. To me, he signified the threatening danger was not so much death as permanent alienation of intellect. Yeah, Kathy's mental. I can say that. I did not close my eyes that night, nor did Mr. Linton. Indeed, we never went to bed, and the servants were all up long before the usual hour, moving through the house with stealthy tread, and exchanging whispers as they encountered each other in their vocations. Everyone was active but Miss Isabella, and they began to remark how sound she slept. Her brother, too, asked if she had risen, and seemed impatient for her presence, and hurt that she showed so little anxiety for her sister-in-law. I trembled lest he should send me to call her, but I was spared the pain of being the first proclaimant of her flight. One of the maids, a thoughtless girl, who had been on an early errand to Gimmerton, came panting upstairs, open-mouthed, and dashed into the chamber, crying, "Oh, dear, dear, what must we have next? Master, master, our young lady." "Hold your noise," cried I hastily, enraged at her clamorous manner. "Speak lower, Mary. What is the matter?" said Mr. Linton. "What ails your young lady?" Sorry, the screen keeps shaking. I'm leaning my book on it. "She's gone. She's gone. Yon Heathcliff's run off with her," gasped the girl. "That is not true," exclaimed Linton, rising in agitation. "It cannot be. How has the idea entered your head? Ellen Dean, go and see her. It is incredible. It cannot be." Heathcliff is just cucking Edgar every way possible, because women are property. Good girl, Flora." As he spoke, he took the servant to the door, and then repeated his demand to know her reasons for such an assertion. "Why, I met on the road a lad that fetches milk here," she stammered, "and he asked whether we weren't in trouble at the Grange. I thought he meant for Mrs. Sickness, so I answered yes. Then says he, there's someone got after them, I guess. And I stared. He saw I knew naught about it, and he told how a gentleman and a lady had stopped to have a horse's shoe fastened at a blacksmith's shop, 2 miles out of Gimmerton, not very long after midnight, and how the blacksmith's lass got up to spy who they were. She knew them both directly. And she noticed the man. Heathcliff it was, she felt certain. Nobody could mistake him, besides. Put a sovereign in her father's hand for payment. The lady had a cloak about her face, but having desired a sup of water while she drank it, it fell back, and she saw her very plain. Heathcliff held both bridles as they rode on, and they set their faces from the village and went as fast as the rough roads would let them. The lass said nothing to her father, but she told it all over Gimmerton this morning. Gossipy gossip. Flora, do you want to go outside? You have to be kind to me. I mustn't be vexed, Flora. I'm an angel. I ran and peeped for form's sake into Isabella's room, confirming when I returned the servant's statement. Mr. Linton had resumed his seat by the bed. On my re-entrance he raised his eyes, read the meaning of my blank aspect, and dropped them without giving an order or uttering a word. Are we to try any measures for overtaking and bringing her back? I inquired. How should we do? She went of her own accord, answered the master. She had a right to go if she pleased. Trouble me no more about her. Henceforth she is only my sister in name, not because I disown her, but because she has disowned me. And that was all he said on the subject. He did not make a single inquiry further, or mention her in any way, except directing me to send what property she had in the house to her fresh home, wherever it was, when I knew it. And we've only been going for half an hour, so maybe I'm going to check and see how long the next chapter is. Yeah. You guys want to go for another hour? I mean, I got nowhere to be. Fuck it, we'll keep going. Sorry, I'm just listening. I thought I heard something outside. Maybe we will, maybe we won't. You'd love to? Okay. Alright, good. I was kind of tossing it up and then I wasn't sure, and then I thought I was sure but the other way, but then I thought my brain is Oh, well. Nick, you mustn't be vexed. Doctor's orders. Therefore, Wuthering Heights, Chapter 13. For 2 months, the fugitives remained absent. In those 2 months, Mrs. Linton encountered and conquered the worst shock of what was denominated a brain fever. Brain fever is hilarious, just as a phrase. A brain fever. No mother could have nursed an only child more devotedly than Edgar tended her. Day and night he was watching, and patiently enduring all the annoyances that irritable nerves and a shaken reason could inflict. And though Kenneth remarked that what he saved from the grave would only recompense his care by forming the source of constant future anxiety, in fact, that his health and strength were being sacrificed to preserve a mere ruin of humanity, he knew no limits in gratitude and joy when Catherine's life was declared out of danger. And hour after hour he would sit beside her, tracing the gradual return to bodily health, and flattering his too sanguine hopes with the illusion that her mind would settle back to its right balance also, and she would soon be entirely her former self. I'm an angel. I mustn't be vexed. Dr. Kenneth is such a great character. No one talks about Dr. Kenneth. He's just like, well, I mean, we could save her life, but she might have a mental illness. This is the hardest part of a doctor's job. Anyway, the first time she left her chamber was at the commencement of the following March. Mr. Linton had put on her pillow in the morning a handful of golden crocuses. Her eye, long stranger to any gleam of pleasure, caught them in waking, and shone delighted as she gathered them eagerly together. "These are the earliest flowers at the Heights," she exclaimed. "They remind me of soft thaw winds, and warm sunshine, and nearly melted snow. Edgar, is there not a south wind, and is not the snow almost gone?" "The snow is quite gone down here, darling," replied her husband, "and I only see 2 white spots on the whole range of moors. The sky is blue, and the larks are singing, and the becks and brooks are all brimful. Catherine, last spring at this time, I was longing to have you under this roof. Now I wish you were a mile or 2 up those hills. The air blows so sweetly I feel it would cure you." "I shall never be there but once more," said the invalid, "and then you'll leave me, and I shall remain forever. Next spring you'll long again to have me under this roof, and you'll look back and think you were happy today." I love how Catherine just dies because she's determined to, and everyone's telling her she isn't dying. Well, spoiler. Linton lavished on her the kindest caresses, and tried to cheer her by the fondest words. But, vaguely regarding the flowers, she let tears collect on her lashes and stream down her cheeks unheeding. We knew she was really better, and therefore decided that long confinement to a single place produced much of this despondency, and it might be partially removed by a change of scene. The master told me to light a fire in the many weeks deserted parlour, and to sit an easy chair in the sunshine by the window. And then he brought her down, and she sat a long while enjoying the genial heat, and, as we expected, revived by the objects around her, which, though familiar, were free from the dreary associations investing her hated sick chamber. By evening she seemed greatly exhausted, yet no arguments could persuade her to return to that apartment, and I had to arrange the parlour sofa for her bed till another room could be prepared. To obviate the fatigue of mounting and descending the stairs, we fitted up this, where you lie at present, on the same floor with the parlour, and she was soon strong enough to move from one to the other, leaning on Edgar's arms. Ah, I thought myself, she might recover, so weighted on as she was. Edgar, man, bloody hell. And there was double cause to desire it, for on her existence depended that of another. We cherished the hope that in a little while Mr. Linton's heart would be gladdened and his lands secured from a stranger's grip by the birth of an heir. Kathy is with fetus. Oh, hello, darling. Hello, my love, and you come. Good girl, Niobe, good girl. You gotta come all the way in. That's it. Good girl. Good girl. That's Niobe. I don't know if you can tell from me howling her name. There we go. Now the armrest is free. It's her favourite spot. I should mention that Isabella sent to her brother, some 6 weeks after her departure, a short note announcing her marriage with Heathcliff. It appeared dry and cold, but at the bottom was dotted in with pencil an obscure apology and an entreaty for kind remembrance and reconciliation if her proceeding had offended him, asserting that she could not help it then, and being done, she had now no power to repeal it. Linton did not reply to this, I believe, and in a fortnight more I got a long letter, which I considered odd coming from the pen of a bride just out of the honeymoon. I'll read it, for I keep it yet. Any relic of the dead is precious if they were valued living. And if you've had a really bad relationship, content warning, I can't really remember what the letter it says exactly, but content warning, guys. Dear Ellen, it begins. I came last night to Wuthering Heights, and heard for the first time that Catherine has been, and as yet very ill. I must not write to her, I suppose, and my brother is either too angry or too distressed to answer what I sent him. Still, I must write to somebody, and the only choice left me is you. Well, that's flattering. Inform Edgar that I'd give the world to see his face again, that my heart returned to Thrushcross Grange in 24 hours after I left it, and is there at this moment, full of warm feelings for him and Catherine. I can't follow it, though. These words are underlined, and they need not expect me, and they may draw what conclusions they please, taking care, however, to lay nothing at the door of my weak will or deficient affection. The remainder of the letter is for yourself alone. I want to ask you 2 questions. The first is, how did you contrive to preserve the common sympathies of human nature when you resided here? I cannot recognize any sentiment with which those around share with me. The second question I have great interest in. It is this. Is Mr. Heathcliff a man? If so, is he mad? And if not, is he a devil? I shan't tell my reasons for making this inquiry, but I beseech you to explain, if you can, what I have married. That is, when you call to see me. And you must call, Ellen, very soon. Don't write, but come, and bring me something from Edgar. Now you shall hear how I have been received in my new home, as I am led to imagine the Heights will be. It is to amuse myself that I dwell on such subjects as the lack of external comforts. They never occupy my thoughts except at the moment when I miss them. I should laugh and dance for joy if I found their absence was the total of my miseries, and the rest was an unnatural dream. The sun set behind the Grange as we turned on the moors. By that I judged it to be 6 o'clock, and my companion halted half an hour to inspect the park and the gardens, and probably the place itself as well as he could. So it was dark when we dismounted in the paved yard of the farmhouse, and your old fellow servant, Joseph, issued out to receive us by the light of a dip candle. He did it with a courtesy that redounded to his credit. His first act was to elevate his torch to a level with my face, squint malignantly, project his underlip, and turn away. Then he took the 2 horses and led them into the stables, reappearing for the purpose of locking the outer gate as if we lived in an ancient castle. Heathcliff stayed to speak to him, and I entered the kitchen. A dingy, untidy hole. I dare say you would not know it. It is so changed since it was in your charge. By the fire stood a ruffianly child, strong in limb and dirty in garb, with a look of Catherine in his eyes and about his mouth. This is Edgar's legal nephew, I reflected. Mine, in a manner. I must shake hands, and yes, I must kiss him. It is right to establish a good understanding at the beginning. I approached, and attempting to take his chubby fist, said, "How do you do, my dear?" He replied in a jargon I did not comprehend. "Shall you and I be friends, Hareton?" was my next essay at conversation. An oath, and the threat to set Throttler on me if I did not frame off, rewarded my perseverance. It does say frame off. I'm pretty sure it's not what Hareton said. No, I thought it was another cat. "Hey, Throttler, lad," whispered the little wretch, rousing a half-bred bulldog from its lair in the corner. "Now, wilt thou be going?" he asked authoritatively. Love for my life urged a compliance. I stepped over the threshold to wait till the others should enter. Mr. Heathcliff was nowhere visible, and Joseph, whom I followed to the stables and requested to accompany me in, after staring and muttering to himself, screwed up his nose and replied, "Did ever a Christian body hear anything like it? Mincing and munching. How can I tell what you say?" I'm translating Joseph. Yeah, Emily Bronte knows how funny and annoying he is. "I say, I wish you were to come with me into the house," I cried, thinking him deaf, yet highly disgusted at his rudeness. "None of me. I got something else to do," he answered, and continued his work, moving his lantern jaws meanwhile and surveying my dress and countenance. The former a great deal too fine, but the latter, I'm sure, as sad as he could desire, with sovereign contempt. I walked round the yard and through a wicket to another door, at which I took the liberty of knocking in hopes some more civil servant might show himself. After a short After a short suspense, it was opened by a tall, gaunt man, without neckerchief and otherwise extremely slovenly. His features were lost in masses of shaggy hair that hung on his shoulders. And his eyes, too, were like a ghostly Catherine's, with all their beauty annihilated. "What's your business here?" he demanded grimly. "Who are you?" "My name was Isabella Linton," I replied. "You've seen me before, sir. I'm lately married to Mr. Heathcliff, and he has brought me here, I suppose by your permission." "Has he come back, then?" asked the hermit, glaring like a hungry wolf. "Yes, we came just now," I said. "But he left me by the kitchen door, and when I would have gone in, your little boy played sentinel over the place, and frightened me off by the help of a bulldog." "It's well the hellish villain has kept his word," growled my future host, searching the darkness behind me in expectation of discovering Heathcliff. And then he indulged in a soliloquy of execrations and threats of what he would have done had the fiend deceived him. I repented having tried this second entrance, and was almost inclined to slip away before he finished cursing. But ere I could execute that intention, he ordered me in, and shut and refastened the door. There was a great fire, and that was all the light in the huge apartment, whose floor had grown a uniform grey, and the once brilliant pewter dishes, which used to attract my gaze when I was a girl, partook of a similar obscurity, created by tarnish and dust. I inquired whether I might call the maid and be conducted to a bedroom. Mr. Earnshaw vouchsafed no answer. He walked up and down with his hands in his pockets, apparently quite forgetting my presence, and his abstraction was evidently so deep, and his whole aspect so misanthropical, that I shrank from disturbing him again. You'll not be surprised, Ellen, at my feeling particularly cheerless, seated in worse than solitude on that inhospitable hearth, and remembering that 4 miles distant lay my delightful home, containing the only people I loved on earth, and there might as well be the Atlantic to part us instead of those 4 miles. I could not overpass them. I questioned with myself, where must I turn for comfort? And, mind you don't tell Edgar or Catherine, above every sorrow beside this rose preeminent, despair at finding nobody who could or would be my ally against Heathcliff. I had sought shelter at Wuthering Heights almost gladly, because I was secured by that arrangement from living alone with him. But he knew the people we were coming amongst, and he did not fear their intermeddling. "Hello, darling Gil." I'll feed her in a minute. I sat and thought a doleful time. The clock struck 8 and 9, and still my companion paced to and fro, his head bent on his breast, and perfectly silent, unless a groan or a bitter ejaculation forced itself out at intervals. I listened to detect a woman's voice in the house, and filled the interim with wild regrets and dismal anticipations, which, at last, spoke audibly in irrepressible sighing and weeping. I was not aware how openly I grieved till Earnshaw halted opposite in his measured walk, and gave me a stare of newly awakened surprise. Taking advantage of his recovered attention, I exclaimed, "I'm tired with my journey, and I want to go to bed. Where is the maidservant? Direct me to her, as she won't come to me." "We have none," he answered. "You must wait on yourself." "Where should I sleep, then?" I sobbed. I was beyond regarding self-respect, weighed down by fatigue and wretchedness. "Joseph will show you Heathcliff's chamber," said he. "Open that door. He's in there." I was going to obey, but he suddenly arrested me and added in the strangest tone, "Be so good as to turn your lock and draw your bolt. Don't admit it. Omit it." "Well," I said, "but why, Mr. Earnshaw?" I did not relish the notion of deliberately fastening myself in with Heathcliff. "Look here," he replied, pulling from his waistcoat a curiously constructed pistol, having a double-edged spring knife attached to the barrel. "That's a great tempter to a desperate man, is it not? I cannot resist going up with this every night and trying his door. If once I find it open, he's done for. I do it invariably, even though the minute before I have been recalling 100 reasons that should make me refrain. It is some devil that urges me to thwart my own schemes by killing him. You fight against that devil for love as long as you may. When the time comes, not all the angels in heaven shall save him." Hindley is just as extra as Catherine. He just pretends he isn't. Oh, she's lying down on the special memory foam cat mat that I put right onto the heat pump. I tricked her onto it. I did it. I surveyed the weapon inquisitively. A hideous notion struck me. How powerful I should be possessing such an instrument. I took it from his hand and touched the blade. He looked astonished at the expression my face assumed during a brief second. It was not horror, it was covetousness. He snatched the pistol back jealously, shut the knife, and returned it to its concealment. "I don't care if you tell him," said he. "Put him on his guard and watch for him. You know the terms we are on, I see. His danger does not shock you." Every night I go up, see if the door's locked. If it's locked, I come back down, have a sandwich, go back to bed. If it's unlocked, I'm gonna kill whoever's in there. Anyway, welcome to your new home. "What has Heathcliff done to you?" I asked. "And what has he wronged you to warrant this appalling hatred? Wouldn't it be wiser to bid him quit the house?" "No," thundered Earnshaw. "Should he offer to leave me, he's a dead man. Persuade him to attempt it, and you are a murderess. Am I to lose all without a chance of retrieval? Is Hareton to be a beggar? Ah, damnation, I will have it back, and I'll have his gold too, and then his blood, and hell shall have his soul. It will be 10 times blacker with that guest than ever it was before." "You've acquainted me, Alan, with your old master's habits. He is clearly on the verge of madness. He was so last night, at least." I shuddered to be near him, and thought on the servant's ill-bred moroseness as comparatively agreeable. He now recommenced his moody walk, and I raised the latch and escaped into the kitchen. Joseph was bending over the fire, peering into a large pan that swung above it, and a wooden bowl of oatmeal stood on the settle close by. The contents of the pan began to boil, and he turned to plunge his hand into the bowl. I conjectured that this preparation was probably for our supper, and being hungry, I resolved it should be eatable. So, crying out sharply, "I'll make the porridge," I removed the vessel out of his reach, and proceeded to take off my hat and riding habit. "Mr. Earnshaw," I continued, "directs me to wait on myself, and I will. I'm not going to act the lady among you, for fear I should starve." "Good Lord," he muttered, sitting down and stroking his ribbed stockings from the knee to the ankle. "If there's to be fresh orderings, just when I'd gotten used to 2 masters, if I must have a mistress set over my head, it's like time to be flitting. I never did think to see the day that I must leave the old place, but I doubt it's nigh at hand." "No one cares, Joseph. Come on." Yeah, I think that's why Mr. Lockwood crossing the moor at night without a guide they made such a big deal of it, because like Emily Bronte knew that we would ask, why doesn't Isabella just walk home? Just walk home. Just go. But she can't. She's Edgar's heir. She's important in the way that an object is important. This lamentation drew no notice from me. I went briskly to work, sighing to remember a period when it would have been all merry fun, but compelled speedily to drive off the remembrance. It racked me to recall past happiness, and the greater peril there was of conjuring up its apparition, the quicker the thimble ran round, and the faster the handfuls of meal fell into the water. Joseph beheld my style of cookery with growing indignation. "There," he ejaculated. "Ugh. Hareton, you won't sup your porridge tonight. There'll be nothing but lumps as big as my knave." "Don't know what that is, don't wanna." "There again. I'd fling in bowl and all if I were you. There, pail and gallop off, and then you'll have done with it. Bang, bang, it's a mercy the bottom isn't deefed out." I don't want to explain what the porridge thing was about. I can't be bothered. It was rather a rough mess, I own, when poured into the basins. 4 had been provided, and a gallon pitcher of new milk was brought from the dairy, which Hareton seized and commenced drinking and spilling from the expansive lip. I expostulated and desired that he should have his in a mug, affirming that I could not taste the liquid treated so dirtily. The old cynic chose to be vastly offended at this nicety, assuring me repeatedly that the barn was every bit as good as I, and every bit as wholesome, and wondering how I could fashion to be so conceited. Meanwhile, the infant ruffian continued sucking, and glowered up at me defyingly as he slavered into the jug. So much gothic horror and people wanting to murder each other, and also that kid is drinking milk right from the big bowl. Oh my god. Is there no depravity to which the inhabitants of Wuthering Heights will not sink? "I shall have my supper in another room," I said. "Have you no place you call a parlour?" "Parlour?" he echoed sneeringly. "Parlour? No, we've no parlours. If you don't like our company, there's the master's. And if you don't like master, there's us." "Then I shall go upstairs," I answered. "Show me a chamber." I put my basin on a tray and went to fetch myself some more milk. With great grumblings, the fellow rose and preceded me in my ascent. We mounted to the garrets, and he opened a door now and then to look into the apartments we passed. "Here's a room," he said at last, flinging back a cranky board on hinges. "It's well enough to eat a few porridge in. There's a pack of corn in the corner there. Basically clean. If you're afeard of dirtying your grand silk clothes, spread your handkerchief out on top of it." I know. That's no place to raise a child. A place where he thinks he can just drink out of the milk. The room was a kind of lumber hole smelling strong of malt and grain, various sacks of which articles were piled around, leaving a wide bare space in the middle. "Why, man," I exclaimed, facing him angrily, "this is not a place to sleep in. I wish to see my bedroom." "Bedroom," he repeated in a tone of mockery. "You'll see all the bedrooms there is. That one's mine." He pointed into the second garret, only differing from the first and being more naked about the walls, and having a large, low, curtainless bed with an indigo-coloured quilt at one end. "What do I want with yours?" I retorted. "I suppose Mr. Heathcliff does not lodge at the top of the house, does he?" "Oh, it's Master Heathcliff's you're wanting," cried he, as if making a new discovery. "Couldn't you have said so at once? And then I would have told you, without all this work, that there's just one you cannot see. He always keeps it locked, and nobody ever meddles with it but himself." "You've a nice house, Joseph," I could not refrain from observing, "and pleasant inmates. and I think the concentrated essence of all the madness in the world took up its abode in my brain the day I linked my fate with theirs. However, that is not to the present purpose. There are other rooms. For heaven's sake, be quick and let me settle somewhere. He made no reply to this adjuration, only plodding doggedly down the wooden steps and halting before an apartment which, from that halt and the superior quality of its furniture, I conjectured to be the best one. There was a carpet, a good one, but the pattern was obliterated by dust. A fireplace hung with cut paper, dropping to pieces. A handsome oak bedstead with ample crimson curtains of rather expensive material and modern make, but they had evidently experienced rough usage. The valances hung in festoons, wrenched from their rings, and the iron rod supporting them was bent in an arc on one side, causing the drapery to trail upon the floor. The chairs were also damaged, many of them severely, and deep indentations deformed the panels of the walls. I was endeavouring to gather resolution for entering and taking possession, when my fool of a guide announced, "This here is the master's." My supper by this time was cold, my appetite gone, and my patience exhausted. I insisted on being provided instantly with a place of refuge and means of repose. Niobe's asleep and snoring. She's never fallen asleep indoors before. Oh my god. Where the devil, began the religious elder. The Lord bless us. The Lord forgive us. Where the hell would you go? You've seen all but Hareton's bit of chamber. There's not another hole to lie down in the house. Christ, is annoying. I was so vexed I flung my tray and its contents on the ground, and then seated myself at the stairs head, hid my face in my hands, and cried. "Oh," exclaimed Joseph, "well done, Miss Cathy. Well done, Miss Cathy. However, the master shall just tumble over them broken pots, and then we'll hear something. We'll hear how it's to be. Good for naught, maddling. You deserve pining from this to Christmas, flinging the precious gifts of God under foot in your flaysome rages. But I'm mistaken if you'll show your spirit long. Will Heathcliff bide such bonny ways, think you? I no but wish he may catch you, that Plisky. I no but wish he may." Joseph is hoping that Heathcliff will beat Isabella. It's quite a nice way to be welcomed into your new marital home. And so he went on scolding to his den beneath, taking the candle with him, and I remained in the dark. The period of reflection succeeding this silly action compelled me to admit the necessity of smothering my pride and choking my wrath, and bestirring myself to remove its effects. An unexpected aid presently appeared in the shape of Throttler, whom I now recognised as a son of our old skulker. It had spent its whelphood at the Grange, and was given by my father to Mr. Hindley. I fancy it knew me. It pushed its nose against mine by way of salute, and then hastened to devour the porridge, while I groped from step to step, collecting the shattered earthenware, and drying the spatters of milk from the banister with my pocket handkerchief. Our labours were scarcely over, when I heard Earnshaw's tread in the passage. My assistant tucked in his tail and pressed to the wall. I stole into the nearest doorway. The dog's endeavour to avoid him was unsuccessful. Gonna skip the rest of that sentence. I had better luck. He passed on, entered his chamber, and shut the door. Directly after, Joseph came up with Hareton to put him to bed. I had found shelter in Hareton's room, and the old man, on seeing me, said, "There's room for both you and your pride now, I should think, in the house. It's empty. You may have it all to yourself, and him that always makes a third in such ill company." And by him who always makes a third, it's capitalized, so it's God. Gladly did I take advantage of this intimation, and the minute I flung myself into a chair by the fire, I nodded and slept. My slumber was deep and sweet, though over far too soon. She snores so loudly. Mr. Heathcliff awoke me. He had just come in and demanded in his loving manner what I was doing there. I told him the cause of my staying up so late, that he had the key of our room in his pocket. The adjective our gave mortal offence. He swore it was not nor ever should be mine, but I'll not repeat his language or describe his habitual conduct. He is ingenious and unresting in seeking to gain my abhorrence. I sometimes wonder at him with an intensity that deadens my fear. Yet I assure you, a tiger or a venomous serpent could not rouse terror in me equal to that which he wakes. He told me of Catherine's illness and accused my brother of causing it, promising that I should be Edgar's proxy in suffering till he could get hold of him. I do hate him. I am wretched. I have been a fool. Beware of uttering one breath of this to anyone at the Grange. I shall expect you every day. Don't disappoint me. Isabella. The end of the chapter. What the fuck are you doing here? He said lovingly. Yeah, Heathcliff is a great romantic hero. I think because people don't read this book, really. Oh, yeah, definitely. We finished the chapter that I got only halfway through, and then we did all of the next chapter. Right now, I'm trying to get a video of Niobe asleep and snoring. Yeah, I don't know if we'll be able to hear the snoring, but I'll try and get closer in a minute. So, thank you. I'm very, very happy about the prospect of getting oral ketamine on the 28th. Very much looking forward to it. So much that I even put on lipstick. And a shit ton of concealer on my nose. I'll be over my cold by then. I'll drink so much water, it'll be crazy. I'll have to sleep on the loo. That's how much water I'll be drinking. That doesn't sound nice, actually. I'll drink slightly less water than that. But yeah, thank you all for being here, and I'm sorry about starting and stopping the stream all the time and having to reschedule it around things, but oh, she's awake. Oh, I really hope I can hear her snoring in that video. Thank you, Danny. I'm an angel. So yeah, be safe. Be safe. Look after each other. Wash your hands. I'm a doctor. This stream is live. Stream like no one is watching, because usually no one is. I'm an angel.